We are talking about Roddenberry versus Captain Kirk. Specifically, the son of Gene Roddenberry. Roddenberry is responding to William Shatner's disparaging remarks about modern Star Trek. And this is going to be a fun conversation. Shane, what's happening?
I mean, you pretty much just exactly said it. So William Shatner came out and was like, yeah.
Yeah, I'll play what he said.
William Shatner made a rather live
Oops.
appearance, sounding off, as he put it.
All right, come on.
The
Just
actor
play it. There he goes.
None of us want that, sir, but like that would be
at any moment.
I should die right here. None of us want that, sir, but like that would be fucking amazing.
He also took time to address the importance and power of fandom to his.
I'm sorry. Does anyone like... I'm just going to be real. Someone tell me in the comment section. Are you a fan of the guy from Clerks at this moment, or is he just becoming a parody of himself?
Kevin?
Kevin Smith.
Kevin has had trouble since He-Man. He struggled. The fans are not necessarily on his side anymore.
Yeah, why is he such a D-bag too? I don't get it.
I don't know what happened. You know what I don't know, because maybe he sacrificed. He ended up out of the limelight as a director, and maybe he's just trying to get back in. So now he's embracing Hollywood's disgusting ideology to get back into it, and the fans are finding it as not being true to his own nature.
Yeah, this is the guy who made Clerks and Clerks 2 and Clerk 97 and Mallrats.
Yeah, lots of stuff. Chasing Amy.
He's made plenty of stuff that was like ultra offensive and like, all right, whatever. Anyways, let's talk about this. So what Shatner basically said was that Roddenberry would be turning in his grave over the modern take on Star Trek.
Well, he said over some of the stuff in New Trek.
Right.
He didn't say like everything. He said some. In fact, he actually loves. It's probably because he's friends with Paul Wesley, but he said Paul Wesley's Kirk was great, which we don't all necessarily agree with.
I liked his Kirk. I know people don't like him. I liked him.
You liked Paul Wesley's Kirk?
I mean, he didn't like look the role, but I think he definitely he played like that version of Kirk. He wasn't supposed to be our Kirk. He was supposed to be a version of our Kirk, and I think
right. But Paul Wesley is the third worst Kirk to ever play Kirk out of 3 Kirks.
Now, but we haven't seen him do real Kirk yet, because he was supposed to be playing a version of Kirk that didn't have. Why am I having this conversation again? That didn't have Spock and McCoy as his guiding lights. You know,
well, not yet.
It's a different Kirk. It's a different Kirk.
Okay, fair enough. So basically, William Shatner had made these comments, and I'm sure he's talking about. He's talking about Discovery. I'm sure he's talking about kind of this whole different. Listen, let's be honest here. Rod Roddenberry wasn't about the LGBTQ community a whole lot. He was definitely about. Gene
Roddenberry.
I'm talking about Gene.
Yeah. Sorry, Gene Roddenberry wasn't. Yeah.
Gene wasn't his focus. They tried to actually put gay characters in for years, and Rick Berman also did not want LGBTQ characters in Star Trek, in the newer Star Trek series either. They didn't fight, but they just kind of turned a blind eye to those characters being in it, because at the time, the country was still trying to figure out how they felt about homosexuality.
Plus, it represent. Like, think about it from a business perspective. At the time, it was such a tiny part of the audience. Why would you go out of your way to possibly lose an audience that had a problem with it?
And not to lose an audience, but you've got networks who weren't embracing it. I mean, look what happened to Ellen when she came out on the Ellen DeGeneres show.
Right.
She came out and she essentially, and you listened to her recently talk about it, she was essentially canceled. Like, she could not get work for the longest time.
Right. After
she came out. So, somebody was going to have to make that sacrifice. And unfortunately, it wasn't. We don't know personally how Gene Roddenberry felt about that community. But we know that it was virtually a form of suicide to introduce those characters at that time, especially for a show that was barely clinging on. Now, William Shatner saying here he knew Roddenberry pretty darn well. And he's saying that he would turn over in his grave, which means that Roddenberry probably didn't have very strong feelings about those types of characters. Now
he's not only talking about LGBT characters.
No, but he's also talking about the fact that Star Trek is not being represented in the positive, hopeful light that that he intended it for it to be.
Yeah.
And so that's part of it too.
Yeah. So I had a conversation recently with someone about that, and they go, I disagree with you guys' whole video about how like Star Trek has lost its hope. And I'm like, yeah, listen, you can have your opinion and you can like the new Star Trek, but the only thing that sets Star Trek aside from all the other sci-fi shows for decades was that Star Trek painted a picture of a future where we solved all of our problems. It painted a picture of a future where the petty nonsense wasn't a factor, and it was focusing on leaving Earth. So we solved our problems on Earth, and then we headed out to the stars to help the stars solve their problems. That's what Star Trek was for decades and decades. And what was the antithesis of that? Blade Runner, right?
Yeah. Right.
Terminator. Battlestar Galactica. Name any science fiction show. Literally any science fiction show.
All of them.
Every single one for 60 years was about a future that sucked.
Yeah.
There was more technology or whatever, but it was basically just, it was like we took our current crappy world and we gave it some more tech and we put it in space. And that's what science fiction was for 70 years. And the only different thing for 70 years was Star Trek was like, yeah, that's not our version of the future. Our version of the future is we've solved all these petty, stupid, nonsense problems, and we're exploring the space. That's what made it special. So when Discovery came back and said, you know what? We're going to have all those same problems. Like, well, hold up. Well, now you're not different. You're not Star Trek. So when I say Discovery is Star Trek, I'm not saying it's not Star Trek because of CBS and Paramount licensing issues, or it's not Star Trek because Klutzman sucks, or I don't like Picard, or I'm not saying it for any of those reasons. And if you don't have the problem with that because of those reasons, that's fine. My problem is not with the people that wrote it or who was involved, is because the primary version of Star Trek is the future, and it's the only difference between it and other science fiction shows when you break it down to its raw elements, is that it lacks hope. And Star Trek without hope is not Star Trek.
Yes, and you can thank for that. Let me tell you something. As much as everybody wants to take a big dump on Rick Berman, because he did a lot of things that didn't work out, he's not necessarily a great guy. But the one thing he did is he committed himself completely and entirely to Roddenberry's vision. Mm-hmm. So when Roddenberry died, he said, I'm only going to make Star Trek the way Gene Roddenberry would have made Star Trek. Anybody else had been in his shoes, Star Trek, as far back as the Next Generation, could have been completely different view of the future of Star Trek. So we got to thank, not only Gene for that vision, but also Rick Berman for that vision. And now you have Rod Roddenberry on Strange New Worlds, and he's been doing a lot of he's part of the production. He's a producer on that show.
Right.
And now we have another hopeful looking futuristic version of Star Trek that Rod is part of. And he's trying to be politically correct here when he talks about, how his father might have felt. And he doesn't want his dad to look bad, right? He doesn't want to necessarily go against William Shatner, but at the same time, he wants to protect what he's building right now.
Right.
And that's basically what we have going on here.
Right. And so it's interesting because people often talk about DS9 and they say, oh, well, DS9 was more gritty and had dealt with more problems. Well, Rick Berman was a producer on DS9 too.
Well, yeah, but they were fighting Rick Berman
constantly. So like the reason you got DS9 that had the gritty, like ultra progressive stuff, but in a world where hope still mattered, was because you had a showrunner fighting his boss on every single possible thing.
Right.
And you got a healthy combination of the two things. DS9 did exist in that same hopeful universe, but because of its location and everything, whatever, it had those problems. And it made sense. It made total sense because you had two completely opposing ideologies constantly arguing and bickering about every single script.
Yeah, if Ira had been able to just completely control that show himself, it wouldn't have been Star Trek.
No, it wouldn't have been.
Holding him back
Yeah.
to give us that great DS9 that you love.
It would have been Babylon 5 with tits. That's what it would have been.
I think just adding with that in there is classic.
I mean, it's true though, because he wanted it as much as that. But anyways, let's talk about this. So, what Rod Roddenberry said exactly. He said, "I think he'd be proud of it. I think something that surprises me a bit is the uniqueness of each episode of Strange New Worlds. I'm impressed with what they're doing with that." And
He's talking about Strange New Worlds.
Yes, bring the whole conversation back to Strange New Worlds, because
that's what
I can tell you right now, Shatner wasn't talking about Strange New Worlds.
He was not talking about Strange New Worlds at all.
No way.
Yeah.
There's no way he was talking about Strange New Worlds. He was talking about Discovery.
Mm-hmm.
That's what he was talking about. But Roddenberry very, very adeptly sort of
he hijacks the point of view.
Hijacks that entire thing and brings it right back to, because Strange New Worlds is definitely a return to classic Trek. It really is. Not just because it's episodic, but because it's hopeful.
Yes, the key element of Star Trek is hopefulness.
And it exists in a world, like I said, where we've solved Earth's problems, and now we're heading to the stars, and we're helping people solve their problems. It's a wonderful TV show. And the reason, if you like Strange New Worlds, the reason you like it is because you're remembering the way the universe was supposed to be. It wasn't supposed to be this crazy, dark visage of itself. It was supposed to be that. So it's not just that it's episodic, it's also that the universe is Star Trek. So Shatner was 100% not talking about Strange New Worlds, and Roddenberry just goes, let me just hijack that real quick and bring it right back to my project.
Well, and it makes sense too, because if you would have asked Rod Roddenberry, is Discovery like your dad's vision? He doesn't want to answer that question.
Of course
So
not.
he has to grab the one thing he can say, well, yeah, this is great. Happens to be also something he's a producer on.
Right.
So,
and I liked his comments too at Comic-Con when he was talking about every time someone asked him a question that could have definitely gone to some social thought experiment, he would always bring it back to the story. And I found it interesting. They would ask him about something like this specific kind of person. I think it was disabled people, whatever, in Strange New Worlds. And his answer was well, we have that, we had Hammer, and it was great. It was great. And as much as we can put in there where it fits in the story, then I don't see a problem. And that's the right answer. The right answer should always, as someone who is producing a TV show, the right answer should always be whatever serves the story and not whatever serves a checkbox. That's what it should be.
Right.
So it was very impressive to me. Who knows what he's going to do, but so far I think that he's on the right path. And it's not just because his dad was Gene Roddenberry. I think that maybe there's a lot of pressure there to be like his pops, and that might be helping us out with Strange New Worlds.
Well said, I think.
Okay, well, that said, what do you think? That's our opinion. What are your opinions? Let us know in the comments below. Got anything else to say, Shane? Say, Shane. I can't even talk.
Make sure you guys subscribe, and if you're not subscribed to the channel, and come back for more, we'll give you some more good stuff.
He is right.